Hi, this is going to be a video on creating traditional Linux partitions. So I have a virtual machine, CentOS, on Hyper-V. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a second hard disk. So I'm going to go down to SCSI controller, hard disk, then click add. I'm going to click new and walk through the wizard to create a dynamically expanding disk. I'm going to call it HD1. I'm going to leave the default size 127 gigs, then finish. Click OK. Now I'm going to sign into my Linux box. I'm going to open up a terminal and SU as root. Now I'm going to run the dmessage command. I can see that SDB was inserted. That's going to be the device driver we want to use when we do the partitioning. So what I'm going to do next is create a partition. The command I'm going to use is fdisk. And I'm going to point to the device driver of the disk, not the partition, the disk. Hit enter. Now I'm inside of that command, fdisk. So I'm going to hit M for menu. And what I want to do is create a new partition. So I'm going to hit new. This is for an MBR disk, so I have 4 partitions. So I'm going to choose P for primary. It's going to be partition number 1. I'm going to start at the first available sector that's free, and I'm going to end at the very last sector. That's going to give me 127 gigs. If I wanted to, I could have typed plus 50G, and that would have given me a 50 gigabyte partition. Right now, I'm going to partition the whole hard disk. If I want to view my partitions, I hit P for print. That's the partition that I just created. Right now, everything is in memory. Nothing has been committed to the disk. It won't be committed until I press W to write and exit this program. So now it's been committed to the disk. But my kernel doesn't know about that new partition yet. So what I'm going to do is run the command partprobe and have the kernel reread the partition table. So now the kernel is aware of the new partition. Now I'm going to format that partition. I'm going to use the mkfs xfs command, and this will partition it with the XFS file format. It's the latest one that CentOS is using. I could have used ext3, I could have used ext4. I'm just going to go with the latest one. So now we've created a partition. Now I want to give that partition a label. Uppercase L to assign a label. So what I do is the first argument is going to be the mount point. So basically this is where I want to mount it. So I'm going to make the label match where I want to mount it to. That's how I'm going to access the hard disk. I'm going to go into that directory to access this partition. And the second argument needs to be the device. So in this case, I don't want to supply the disk. I want to supply the partition, which is dev sdb1. Hit enter. Now if I want to view that label, I use a lowercase l and the device driver. So my label's been assigned. Now I want to create the mount point. This is where I'm going to mount that partition to. I can't mount it until I create the directory. Now I have my mount point created, and I can see I have a data directory under the var directory. So now I'm going to test mount it. Mount -t xfs. I'm going to supply my device driver, then the mount point. So it mounted no problem. If I wanted to, I could test write a file into that directory. And if I list it, I can see I was successful in writing a file. So I'm going to unmount it by running the umount command. I could have supplied the device driver or the mount point. Either would have worked. I supplied the device driver. Now I want this partition to mount at boot. So I need to edit a file. When the system boots up, it reads this etc fstab file, and it mounts all the partitions in this file when you boot up the machine. So I'm going to add this partition to the file. So I'm going to edit etc fstab. I'm just going to use VI. I'm hitting colon $ to get to the bottom of the file. I'm going to hit a lowercase o to put me in insert mode below my current line. So I'm going to supply the device driver. I'm going to supply the mount point. I'm going to supply the file system type. And I'm going to have it mount with the default. I'll show you what the defaults are. And I'm not going to check or tune it. So first column is the device driver or label. I could have put label equal and then label name. Label would have been uppercase, or I could supply the device driver. The second column is the mount point. Third is the file system. Then the defaults. Then whether you want to check or tune the hard disk. Excuse me. If you want to check or tune the partition. So I'm going to save my changes. Now, if I made a typo in that file, it could potentially prevent me from booting. So I'm going to test mount it again, but I'm not going to supply all the information. So I'm going to try to mount var data. Typically, I need to supply the file system type, the device driver, and the mount point. If I just supply the mount point or the device driver, it forces the mount command to reread the FS tab to get the missing data. If it was able to read it, you know you don't have any typos in that line. So this is a good way to test your file before booting, because you don't want to have to go into emergency mode just to fix your FS tab because you have a typo. So it was successful in mounting the partition. So that means it was successful in reading the etcfs tab, the line we just edited. It doesn't check the whole file. It just checks that line we edited. So I'm going to look at my mount and grep for SDB. And I can see that it's mounted. So I'm going to reboot my machine and verify that it works at boot. Guys, I'm going to cat this file, cat etc fstab. And this defaults is corresponding to these settings. So when I say defaults here, that's the defaults for this system. I'm not going to go into that, what those are, but those are the defaults. I'm going to reboot and verify that my disk is mounted when it boots up. I'm going to sign in. Just to review your mounts, you don't need to actually sign in as root. We can just view our mounts using the student account. We don't need to be a root or a super user. So I'm going to just type mount and grep for SDB1. I can see that that device driver is mounted on var data. The file system type is FXS. It's in read-write mode. It's actually mounted by root. Root owns this mount. So that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching.